Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for our discussion about bulk oil packaging used in manufacturing settings. My name is Hannah, I work with Centra Foods, and keep in mind you can find us on Twitter. Our handle is @CentraFoods. You can also find us on Facebook. We'd love to meet you and visit with you. Today we're going to be going over some of the different manufacturing packaging options that are best used in a food manufacturing, body care manufacturing type setting. There's a few different choices. The most important reason that we're actually discussing these different packaging options is they have a lot of impact on the way that your production works, how smoothly it works, how easily it works, how people actually interact with the oil and use it and get it into your product. And it also has a big impact on the final price that you have. We're going to start at the smallest size and build up to the largest. So small business manufacturers, listen up now. And larger manufacturers, we'll get with your sizes in just a minute. So the smallest size that I would recommend is going to be the 35-pound containers. Those are also known as jug-in-a-box containers, but essentially they are 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet or so box that has a plastic jug inside. There is also a bag-in-a-box version coming soon. But it holds about 4.6 gallons of oil, whatever oil you decide to go with. And there are 60 of them on a pallet. So pallets are actually quite large. When you use that oil, the good thing about this size is that you can take them, you can handle them individually, you can pour them into your cooking pots, whatever you end up using. They're very easy to handle manually. So if you have a manual production line, this is definitely the way to go. The downside to them is just additional packaging, which you're always going to end up paying for. In comparison to, say, the totes, the larger size, you've got 60 small containers, and just like anything at a retail level, the more packaging, the more it's going to cost. But if it helps your production run smoother, it's worth it. The next size up is the 55-gallon drums, and that's actually the most common size used in manufacturing today. 4 drums come in a pallet. And our drums hold 419 pounds of oil, so keep that calculation in mind when you're looking at your pricing. Now, the advantage to these drums is that if you have to, you can move them manually. It's difficult. They weigh about 500 pounds each, including the packaging, so it's not something that you'd want to do. Having a pallet jack or a forklift makes life a heck of a lot easier with those drums. The downside to those is that they are a slightly smaller size. Again, you're still paying a little bit more for packaging than you should, but they're easy to handle. They're very standard. The way that you get the oil out of those is there's actually a hole at the top known as a bung hole, and you're going to put a drum pump right into that hole. You can buy that drum pump. We have a few suggestions in our blog for where you can go. But normally a drum pump costs anywhere between $50 to $100. That's a one-time purchase that you're going to make, and you reuse it in every drum. It's worth the investment. So you're going to use a drum pump in that and just pump the oil out. You can put it into a small reusable container. However you run your batches, it's quite easy to use. The next size up from that is, if you're a manufacturer, this is going to be the number one size that I would recommend. It's known as totes. And don't think of a tote bag. It's much larger than that. Totes are actually typically either 264, 275, which is the most common size here in the U.S., or 330 gallons. So picture the layout of a pallet. It's going to take that entire space and be about 4 to 5 feet high, filled with oil. Now there's a couple different kinds that you can get. The standard kind is a hard plastic with a caged aluminum frame around the outside. Very strong. There's a built-in spigot right at the bottom, and you can attach to that spigot using a tote pump, or there's actually lots of different ways you can get that oil out. So that's option A. Option B is actually a bag-in-a-box tote. This is a very strong cardboard outer box. The cardboard is going to be about this thick, so it's a very strong material. there's a bag on the inside that actually collapses around the oil as it's used. And that's one of the reasons that I love this bag-in-a-box tote, is it does help preserve the shelf life of the oil as you're using it because it keeps air out. That comes with an attachable spigot, and you do need to ask for that, keep in mind. Unless you already have one, you should be good. You can use that over and over again with your totes. And so these attachable spigots, they work very similarly to the cage totes, the bag-in-a-box totes. Again, they're very strong. They work very similarly to the cage totes, except for when you're done with them, you can break them down or recycle them. They just disappear into nothing. So that is actually really nice about the recyclable totes. The reason that I like this size so much is, A, the oil cost is cheaper. In terms of our pricing, normally it's about 2 cents a pound cheaper. B, the shipping cost is often going to be cheaper. For example, if you go with the 330-gallon bag-in-a-box totes and you ship to a location that has a flat pallet rate, now this doesn't always apply, but for the most part it does, the advantage to that is that you're going to save about 33% on your shipping costs, because you're shipping what is 6 drums worth of oil in the 330-gallon totes across to your location, as opposed to the normal, which is 4 drums of oil in that one tote. And so it does save you money in shipping if it costs the same and it's not a weight-based shipment. Now, the next size up from that is quite a big leap, but if you're using enough oil, it is a very, very worthwhile leap. The next larger size is actually having an in-house storage tank, be it a large tank or a tank farm that's outside of your facility. And your oil would deliver in flexi tanks if it was an international shipment, or tanker trucks if it was a domestic shipment. This would be a large truck that would show up at your facility. You'd use a pump to connect to your storage tank and pump right into that. Normally off the bat, we see about a 10-cent per pound savings on that oil. Because they're larger shipments, most often it does need to be either contracted, or all shipments are based off the current market. So you have to get a current quote every time, and it's going to change every single time you order. Keep in mind, olive oil and all other oils that we deal with actually they're all commodities. So that means that the pricing is changing all the time. Depending on the type of oil, it is by the second, by the minute, by the hour, by the day. So your pricing is going to change. Just keep that in mind. It's kind of an inevitable when you're dealing with ingredients purchasing with commodities. Now, the way that these big tankers and flexi tanks work is they will show up at your facility. With a flexi tank, you actually do need to buy an attachable pump. It does not come with a pump. It's a large container, and it has a removable bladder on the inside. And so you'll attach your reusable pump that you purchased. It's about a $1,000 purchase, definitely worth the investment, because it helps, you're paying off that cost just in the first shipment. So you're going to attach that pump right into your storage tank. And then you're going to remove the bladder and dispose of it at the end. Now with the tanker, you would use these tankers. You get that if you were ordering canola oil, olive oil from a domestic supply, anything like that. And the tanker would show up at your facility, and those actually have a built-in pump, so you don't need one. And so that would pump, again, right into your tank. The advantage with this size is that you can work out routine shipments where if you're going through a routine amount of oil, you know how much you're going to use, we can plan far in advance so that you've got one arriving, once a week, or whatever it is that you need. If it's once every 6 months, that's fine too. Now, with that oil, if you already have tanks set up in your facility, it's actually worth looking at anyways if you just have tanks sitting empty. If you don't, and you're transitioning from totes, moving into tankers and storage tanks in-house, only consider this option if you're using about 250,000 pounds of oil a year or more. That's where you really start to see the price break, where the discount in the oil is going to be worth that setup cost. Typically, if you're using about 250,000 pounds or more in a year, you're actually going to pay off the initial investment cost within about 6 to 18 months. So it's a very fast return on investment. So Definitely worthwhile to look at. If you're using more than that and you're still in the drums, definitely consider doing an evaluation and seeing when and how the transition works and how it's going to make sense for you, because it can save you a lot of money. When we do evaluations for customers that are over 250,000 pounds, typically we're going to see a savings anywhere between $10,000 and $80,000 a year. So it's a very large chunk of money that you're talking about. The initial investment is about $30,000 to put those tanks up. So keep that in mind. Still definitely worth the investment if it's going to save you the money. If you have any questions about these packaging sizes, you want to talk more about what you're up against as a manufacturer, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to contact us anytime. Have a great day.